All right, so this is Mr. Aguilar making this video because Google Classroom today was not working quite that well. It was really glitchy, and I wanted to do a brief summary of today's lesson, what we've been going over, so people who missed the class or if the class was just unwatchable today because of Google Meets, let's get down to what we did today. So Element of Art Texture Challenge, this is our final. Now, before we get into today, you're already supposed to have your mood board finished, which you collected your references and images to use for your final project. And you should have picked two of those images to break down into their basic shapes and how you're going to lay it out to draw it, what your composition is. And this is what you're going to practice on. Like, how do I do this texture? How do I do this element? That's what those sketches are for. And I continue to expect you guys to work on those while you're working on your final. So our objective again is to create an illustration that focuses on texture, values, and light. We've already gone over this lesson plan, so I'm not going to go over the whole thing. Basically, okay, again, your rough drafts are really just breakdown sketches of what you want to do, and I'll show you mine, and I'll tell you about the two different options that we have. The illustration is black and white, no smaller than an 8.5 by 11 surface area. That means the surface of your canvas or paper. So you can't draw something, let's say, like on a 6x4 piece of paper. And it's black and white, so it's either going to be in pencil or pen and ink. If you do something else, you're automatically losing the points. Okay, so pretty much if you go through the guidelines, if you hit all the guidelines, you're going to get full credit A+. But every time you do something that is different than the guideline, meaning you're not meeting your guidelines, you're automatically going to lose points. It has nothing to do with talent. That has everything to do with following directions, effort, and putting your time in. Illustrations must be fully planned out composition, no single floating objects in the middle of the paper. Meaning you just can't do a Christmas tree in the middle of the paper and say, hey, here's my texture challenge final. That doesn't count. We are recreating a scene, making a scene, or we're looking at an image that has different compositional elements and we're translating that into a textured illustration. Remember, these are simulated textures, not actual textures, because we're faking it on paper. Illustrations must display a light source, meaning the illustration must have highlights, midtones, core shadows, and possibly casted shadows. Now, if you're drawing a bird and a tree on a branch and the bird is lit from the front, you're obviously not going to get a casted shadow, or you're going to get a very tiny one on the branch. Again, I'll explain that in a minute. Illustration can be composed of any elements from human-made objects to natural objects or a combination of both. An example would be a cabin in the woods. So you'd have your nature elements, the woods and the trees, and then you'd have your human-made elements, which would be that cabin. Illustration must have multiple types of textures. So again, if you just draw a leaf in the middle of the paper and say, this is my texture final, that's A, not going to count because it's a solo object floating in space. 2, you're only going to have one texture. So we want to make sure that we keep that in mind when we're looking at our images. Use any combination of stippling, dash marks, hatching, cross hatching, scribbling, flat, smooth, or rough shading to create texture. This goes all the way back to our fundamentals of drawing. You can watch those original videos on shading. You can watch the original videos on our note taking. Illustration must have clean presentation, no wrinkles, smudges, torn edges, etc. Again, this isn't based on talent. This is based on cleanliness and can you keep your paper looking nice. Here you have 3 examples of previous texture challenges. Again, in class, I gave kids a template. They got to choose which template they wanted to use, and they added all the texture. Don't have that option again doing this virtual. Here is a landscape, and again, the nice thing about these PDFs is you can blow them up. So if you want to see one of the examples in great detail, these are all high resolution images, and you could just zoom in and you can see, wow, they used a lot of the techniques that we did in class for learning how to do trees, techniques for doing the grass, techniques for doing the mountains. So again, you're just repeating techniques, but you're doing it in a composition or in a scene, and a lot of times you're just repeating the process. For example, the tree. You're repeating this process 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times, maybe 9 times. If you can do it once, you can do it over and over again. That's where you guys need to look at this challenge. You got to break it down. We've done all this stuff already. Now you're just putting it all into one picture. If we go down here, you're going to see some more examples. And again, for the change in the project, I try to find examples because I don't have student examples yet for how we're adjusting this. Here's a structure. Again, you have the stone, you have the brick, you have the stucco, you have the weeds, the dirt, the wood. Looks like little wood bars in here too, and some other elements. Again, multiple textures. This is what you're looking for as reference. A photograph of a building, ruins, in decay, broken down, abandoned. Those are keywords you can look up in Google. And again, you're trying to show multiple textures. If we go over here to the bird, and let me shrink it down a bit. Again, you have a different texture for the beak, a different texture for the fine feathers or foliage for the bird. You have the feathers, and then you have the tree bark. Same thing with this picture too. The light source is coming here, so again, the casted shadow is going to be on the back side, so you're not going to see a lot of that casted shadow. But again, you have your highlights, you have your midtones, you have your dark values. If we look over here at the rock, I think this is a really good example. You have two different types of rocks. One's a little bit rounder and smoother. The other one's a little bit angular, a little bit rough. But here you can clearly see the light is coming from above and hitting it. Then you have all your midtones, and then you have your dark core shadows. So you have your highlights, midtones, core shadows, highlights, midtones, core shadows. You have weeds, you have some pebbles, you got a little bit of ground or dirt, two different types of rocks, two different types of rock textures. So again, this is meeting the criteria for the assignment. And here again, you can see the multiple values with the tree branch and the bird. I think the branch could have some darker values. But that's basically it. And again, you guys have the rubric, you guys have the guidelines, same thing. If it's not pencil and ink, you lose all your points. If it's not 8.5 by 11 or 8 by 10 inch window size, you're losing points. You have one texture, you're losing points. You have one value because you just shaded flat, you're losing all your points. It's nothing to do with talent, nothing to do with ability. Are you following directions? Even someone who struggles with drawing, if they put the effort in, they're going to have multiple values, right? They're going to have multiple textures. It's going to be black and white, pen and ink. That, to me, that's not that hard. Pencil or ink, you pick. Composition. The composition, if you work off a photograph, is already set up for you. Effort. This is where a lot of it comes in. I have students who will do an outline, a silhouette, and then shade it in, like they're shading in a coloring book. That doesn't count. There's no texture. There's no light source. There's no direct light, mid light, no shadows. That doesn't count. So if you do that, you're not going to be getting your points. And that all goes into effort. And then is it sloppy? Is it scribbly? Is it messy? Is it incomplete? Effort. I call what they call ghost images. And that's basically where I get the outline of something and nothing else. No texture, no value, no sense of volume. Those don't count. Those aren't going to get any points. And then presentation. Presentation leads right back up to effort. If there's spills on it, wrinkles, smudge marks all over the place, if you can't keep it clean, you're not going to get full credit on your presentation. So it's 40 points total. In class, we went over student mood boards. I'm not going to bring other students' work into the video without their permission. I'm just going to show you my stuff. But basically, the mood board is you go online, you find a bunch of reference images. For instance, this one here, we used, let's see, I was using this one for mine. We used this one right here for my demo. And I had this as part of my mood board, so I have it up here on the camera. I'm going to show you what I did with it over here. In fact, let me shrink this down so we can just see it side by side. And I'll just move this over just a little bit so you can get a little bit clearer picture of this. And basically what we looked at in class, and again, this is what you're expected to do. Take the object and break it down into its basic shapes. We did a walkthrough yesterday on how to do this. I'm sorry, on Friday, how to do this. your expectation was to have this done. Here I highlighted using the negative space to find your angles, curves, how far apart something is by looking at that negative space. And again, we just went to breaking it down into simple shapes. My demos that I did in class, okay, we started off with the basic shape, and then we went to, okay, how do we add value? How do we show where the shadows are going to go? How are we going to render this hair? And this is what you are doing. How do I render that? What's going to be my approach to making the fur different than from the face? And these are the things that you guys have to practice. Now, the drawing I did for it, so I did a drawing for the class, for the demo, so I want to bring that one up. Okay, so here's that drawing. And again, we want to look at how are we supposed to draw the face, so we have that kind of like that shiny sheen on there, and we have those dark values with the highlights. How do we show the fur? And again, this was just a really nice quick drawing that I did just to demonstrate the difference in textures between when we're doing the horns, we're doing the face, we're doing the fur of the body. How are you going to attack it? And then I'm going to use my example that I've been doing. So let me get off of this real fast so you guys can see it. And for my example, I picked up multiple elements. So I have a raven, and this raven was sitting on something else, right? I have a skull, I have some old textbooks, I had some melted candles, and I have an inkwell. I put all this together, I sketched it out, and this is acting as my reference that I'm using. Okay, so once I constructed everything, this became my reference, and then I'm going to do it in ink. One of the things I have pointed out repeatedly is I did all line work. I did not do flat shading. Let's see if the camera can pick it up. So this is just actual lines, right? I didn't do any flat shading in it because I planned on doing it in ink. So I wanted to make sure that you guys could see that. And then what I did is, this is my practice sheet. And this is where I try to figure out if I like something or don't like something. And one of the things I didn't like was this harsh outline and this harsh outline mixing with this type of shading. So again, I'm going through and figuring out, okay, how do I want to show this? How am I going to show some detail? I didn't like this part in the skull. So again, I practiced down here. I got a little carried away with my practice, but how was I going to do the eye? How was I going to do the skull part right here, the front plate? How was I going to attack down here? These are questions that I had. Again, if I didn't like something, I practiced it again down here. And these right here are just all my little warm-ups that I do before I start working on this. So now this is going to be my final. Okay. I still haven't done the eye yet. I'm going to finish doing that eye. There's certain things I kind of skipped around and jumped around. There's still things about this I like and don't like. I might come back in and add a little bit more here because I can see that white kind of popping up off the paper a little bit too much. I'm probably going to add a little bit more into the skull, but again, I want to wait till I get some of these other elements done. I have the inkwell done. I'm working on the feather. Then I'm going to be doing the candles. Now, my biggest question mark is how am I going to do the background? The background's going to be like 90% black, and I want to have the flame and I want to have the smoke coming off of this, and that presents a unique challenge. If I was using graphite, I would do a graphite shading smooth rub on this whole entire back area, and then I would take an eraser and I would erase out my smoke. But I don't have that option in ink. So one of the things is when I'm done inking this and I have this set to where I want it, I'm going to come back on here, and in these areas over here I'm going to practice different ways of rendering the background and having that smoke come up. So that's the last thing that I need to figure out, but I'll get to that when that time comes. So this is the process. This is what everyone needs to do. You need to find your reference image. You need to break it down. You need to use it to practice. When you have what you want to do, your practice sheet, your warm-up sheet, they can all be the same. These are kind of like your studies that you do before you go into your final. This is the expectation. Today we are starting our final. That is what we covered today. The only thing difference in classes, we looked at a few people's mood boards. A couple people turned in their sketches, so we looked at those so I could get feedback. Again, I'm not going to do that without people's permission to use their work that they're already doing. But I wanted you guys to get a clearer picture of what we did today, because Google Classroom was just so bad today. And I don't know why it changes from day to day or week to week. But this is what we covered today. So if you missed class or class was unclear, I expect you to watch this video. But again, that's on you. No one can force you to do anything. You have to decide to do this for yourself. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. Today is Monday, February 22nd. And this is what we covered today.